Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. I'm really grateful. Oh, hi, Frankie. I'm grateful to stand with you today on a day when we have really such great news. First, I must thank Governor Hochul for her leadership and call for immediate action in the aftermath of this devastating storm. Her vision to help all New Yorkers rebuild is what brings us all here today. In record time, the remnants of Hurricane Ida destroyed the homes and livelihoods of so many in its wake, particularly impacting immigrants throughout the city. As we see time and again when faced with storms or other crises, such as COVID-19, and we see that the communities that are traditionally underserved are always the hardest hit, and they may not be eligible for federal aid. So here in New York, the New York State Office for New Americans is ready to employ our resources to help connect all undocumented workers with much needed relief to help them rebuild. I want to recognize some of the folks who are joining us today. Congressmember Grace Meng. New York State Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie. I know he's sitting next to me, so he hasn't arrived yet, but Queensborough President Donovan Richards. State Senator Jessica Ramos. Assembly Member Catalina Cruz. Assembly Member Jessica Gonzalez Rojas. Assembly Member Neely Rosick. New York City Commissioner Raquel Batista of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. And all of our partners who are here today, I want to thank you for being here. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce New York's 57th governor, Governor Kathy Hochul.
Buenas tardes. I'm so happy to see you. Great to see everyone. This is a day that demonstrates one thing, that every New Yorker matters. Let me repeat that. Every New Yorker matters. And I have been blessed to be surrounded by some exceptionally passionate individuals who will always make sure that we do the right thing. And I want to thank our incredible secretary. Rosanna Rosada has done an amazing job for many years. And when you need help, you call this woman, and she'll make sure that good things happen. I want to thank her for being such a friend and ally for such a long time. Grace Meng and I became great friends in Congress and our time there, but also you've been an incredible leader and making sure that everyone is taken care of. We literally spoke about some of the individuals in your district who we had met weeks ago, and I said, how are they doing? And you said they still can't cook because they don't have gas. And we said, we're taking care of that, and they had gas. I'm going to go there for dinner because they can cook now, but thank you. That's how in tune she is with the needs of her district. And also, I know our speaker will be joining us, but Donovan Richards also, it's a lot of responsibility to govern such a diverse, incredible place. I know our district attorney who's joined us, Melinda Katz, can speak to this, but you've done an amazing job with a lot of challenges. I kind of know what it's like to be new on the job with a lot thrown at you. So we have some simpatico here, but also thank you. Thank you for all you've done. And again, our district attorney, Melinda Katz, who just does an extraordinary job protecting the people in their time of need and making sure that we do what's right by Queens. So let's give her a round of applause as well. You had to see your state representatives, though, on the ground. I mean, I was so touched by their willingness to roll up their sleeves and be out there literally day after day after day, neglecting their own families or bringing their kids with them, showing up on site. And to Jessica Ramos, I'm still in awe of what I saw you do over that period of time when people needed you the most. Let's give her a round of applause, Jessica Ramos. Assemblymember Catalina Cruz, showing just heart and compassion for the people who look to you for leadership, and you were there on the ground as well. Catalina Cruz, thank you. Assemblymember Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, same thing. We were just It was some hot days. We're all wearing, kind of everybody's getting a little sweaty and a little worn and a little dirty, but you didn't give up. You were there every second. And so I remember Nidley Rozek, I want to thank you as well for just showing up when the people of your district needed you the most. I also want to give a huge shout out to the city of New York. Now, that might just make news right there by itself. Raquel Batista, thank you. And we did have many conversations. Literally the night that the rain started coming down, Mayor de Blasio and I were on speed dial. We spoke through the evenings, through the night, the next day, the days afterward, and we showed up in person. And we just said to ourselves, we have to do something. This is unexpected in the sense that no one could have dreamed that much rain would fall, literally shattering a record that was set the week before. I mean, people talk about 500-year storms. They don't do math very well because this was 10 days apart. And the way we handled it was just to show for our first time really working together, having the opportunity to work together, what teamwork means and how we can put the needs of the people first. And that will always be the hallmark of my administration going forward, the current mayor, the future mayor, and anybody who wants to help me take care of the people of this great state. I will consider you a friend and an ally, and that's how we're going to change dynamics here. So thank you to the City of New York, who also helped put financial resources on the table for this as well, which is quite amazing. So having seen individuals at their lowest point in their lives, I think about our first visits to East Elmhurst, walking down a flooded alleyway, which never should have been a place where people had to call home, but they didn't have a lot of options. This was their home. They lived in basements. And these basements were not meant for people to be in because they ended up being death traps. People were literally trapped in their homes because if you walked down this alleyway and saw the entrance into their homes, and these homes were tiny, but it was their place. It was their place where they had all their most precious belongings. There was no exit out the back. So when the water started coming and people like Murphy were sleeping in his bed, and we all met Murphy, sleeping in his bed, all of a sudden he wakes up, the water's up to his chin, and this was a big guy. And he couldn't get out the back, and he almost drowned in his home until the first responders, and God bless our first responders, they broke down that window and reached him and pulled him out. He says he would not have been there if they'd waited just a few more moments. Some others were not as fortunate. We lost them. They lost part of our family. We'll never forget them. But others, you went back the next day. We were there on the 3rd, September 4th, September 7th. We came back with the president. And every time we went back, I just saw a more heartbreaking story. People literally on the ground just picking up scraps of pictures of their wedding or their babies and the clothes that were destroyed. And then when Grace, Meg, and I walked to the neighborhood not far from there, people literally, a family lost their lives, and we placed flowers on the doorstep. And just, it's the smallest token of what we can offer, but knowing that we had a responsibility to these people. We could not walk away. You could not see this and turn your eyes away and not say, I have to do something about this. And when President Biden was there, we talked about how grateful we were that he gave us the declaration that allowed us to bring in FEMA money. And we set up Department of Financial Services vans on the site along with food trucks right there so people could get the forms filled out. And what we thought was this is a great program until the realization set in that if you were not documented, you didn't have access to the FEMA money. And that was really hard for people to hear that and to understand that. If you had a member of the family who did have citizenship, perhaps a child, that was great. It allowed the whole family to get FEMA benefits. But as I left there and I realized these people were looking to us in government to help them rebuild their lives, and we were going to have to say, sorry, you don't qualify? No. We're at war with Mother Nature sometimes, but we don't leave anybody on the battlefield. We bring everybody with us. We find out a way to help them regain some semblance of their past life and tell them we care about them, we believe in them, and we love them. And as a statement of our compassion for these individuals, we are establishing, and the applications start today, a brand-new Ida Relief Fund for excluded New Yorkers. We're announcing it right now, making sure it's available. The program is $27 million, $20 million from our state emergency appropriations, and I thank the City of New York for adding $7 million to that pot as well. So thank you to them and to all of our team who pulled together the ability to make this happen. And what we're going to do is basically treat everybody the same qualifications, the same documentation is required, not a lot. We're just going to let you get a letter from a landlord to say you lived here, or a utility bill. It's not going to be that hard, but the difference will be you do not have to prove citizenship to get this help. And the money will be $36,000, up to that available for housing assistance, and up to $36,000 for other needs. So eligible for $72,000 to start getting their lives back. That is powerful. That's how we start letting people know they matter in the state of New York. And how are we going to get this money out there? Because enough time has passed already. I know everyone's praising us for doing this quickly, but no one on the is more impatient than I am. I wanted this done, and it's happening immediately. So we're going to, first of all, have partners, and I thank everyone who stepped up. In the Bronx, we have Catholic Charities Community Services, and in the Brooklyn, we have the Chinese American Planning Council. In Queens, we have 2 locations, Make the Road, thank you. Minkwan as well. Staten Island and Suffolk, Make the Road will be helping there. Nassau will have the Economic Opportunity Commission of Nassau County, and in Westchester and Rockland will have Neighbors Link. So these are the individuals that are part of our army to go out and help people. When I say we're not leaving anyone on the battlefield, these people will be going out, these organizations and the incredible leadership that they have will be going out there, literally meeting people where they are and helping them fill out the forms. There's also a hotline, write this down, and my 6 years of Spanish are not going to let me translate this properly because I don't want to be off a number, so someone else will come up and give this number in Spanish for me. But 1-800-566-7636, and that's the Office for New Americans, and that has been operational for a while, but this is an additional responsibility we're asking them to do, to be the clearinghouse. Calls go in there, and then we connect people with the information they need, and also the not-for-profit partner to help them get over the finish line. Again, this money came about because of the way that this community has had so many incredible champions, and I want to thank everyone. Most of you in this audience are part of why this has happened, and I thank you, and I know individuals who suffered for far too long. Thank you as well. And to me, this is the best summary of my philosophy of government. It's real simple, my friends. We help people. We take care of people. We care about people. That's it. That's what our responsibility is as public servants to everyone, regardless of their status, because to me, they're part of my family. They're part of the New York family, and we'll do everything we can to help them feel loved and cherished as part of that family. So thank you. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to invite Congresswoman Grace Meng to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Grace Meng, honored to represent parts of Queens and Washington, D.C. I want to thank Governor Hochul and her whole team for bringing us together today. More importantly, I want to thank this governor for leading with compassion, for listening and being responsive to the everyday needs of our Queens residents and our New Yorkers, because that's not something that we see all the time. Since the day after the hurricane hit us here in Queens and New York, I, along with my colleagues, every single elected official here, actually, I have met them in the streets, in the neighborhoods, at the homes of those of our constituents who were affected. And that includes the governor. Thank you for being there with our community as we help them recover. We have traveled across the borough and across the city. I've been to funerals of my constituents, 6 of whom died in the aftermath of the hurricane. And we watched them. The governor and I actually stumbled upon a family where a 6-year-old girl and her mom, who only spoke Spanish, days after the storm, were sitting outside their stoop with a bucket of soapy, sudsy water, washing her shoes. This 6-year-old was there in the evening because they might not have had money to buy new shoes, and this is how they were on their way to recovery. So the destruction that Ida has caused here, especially in Queens, has been devastating. And Queens, including my district, has some of the hardest hit communities. And I really want to thank our organizations here who have been on the ground, not just during Hurricane Ida, but throughout COVID as well. I think we were on speed dial with groups like Make the Road and NYC because the federal government, the previous administration, was not compassionate and didn't provide necessary help for our constituents, including those who didn't have what they deemed to be a necessary documentation. And so our government has to be there to step up for everyone, every single person who requires relief, regardless of what papers they might or might not have, regardless of their immigration status. And that's what we are coming together to ensure today. And I want to thank Governor Hochul, the mayor, and the commissioner, who has been in Queens multiple times just this past month. Thank you so much. For too long, immigrants have gotten the short end of the stick. When we are asking for money, when we are demanding taxes from our immigrants, we make no distinction and don't ask for any necessary paperwork and documentation. When we're looking for necessary services to survive and to have a better quality of life, like transportation or food delivery, no one cares if they're properly documented or not. But when it comes time to help people, to lead with compassion, that's when we start being sticklers and the government asks for proper documentation. And we literally, especially during COVID, left people out to dry. We left people for dead. And so I'm so thankful for the governor and this administration for providing so much necessary help. And I want to be clear that this does not mean that Congress is relieved of its responsibility. We are continuing to work to push FEMA. We have a letter going out this week to make sure that it's working to amend its eligibility for disaster relief so that every single person who was a victim of this disaster and future disasters can get the necessary help, because states should not be left to pick up the tab for a federal disaster relief program. And so I want to urge all who are in need to apply for this crucial funding. And I assure all who reside in my district will continue to work that until every single person gets their gas and hot water back, and to make sure that everyone is made whole again. Because this is cliche, but we cannot just build back to where we were the day before the hurricane, to the day before COVID hit. Our Queens residents never had enough of a chance to succeed, to survive. They had to deal with inequities that so many others didn't have to. And so they deserve this. And thank you again, Governor, for coming to the best borough. Yes, Donovan? The borough that was most impacted from COVID to the pandemic. Thank you for listening to us, and thank you for leading with compassion and responding with compassion. Next, I'm so honored to recognize a friend, a colleague, someone I'm honored to share a district with, someone whom I think on day 1 or day 2 already kept calling, asking what her neighbors and her constituents, many of whom were undocumented, were going to get help, what kind of help they'd get from the federal government. And I have had to, till this point, tell her that they couldn't. And they can't until now, when the governor and her team has stepped in. So thank you, Assemblymember Cruz, for your leadership. This is Doña Nancy. You'll hear from her in a minute.
Governor Hochul, it's an honor to have you here in Queens. I'm told by management here at this amazing location that you're the first governor to come visit us. So what a wonderful, that's what I was told. Can you imagine that? And we will welcome you here many times more. My name is Catalina Cruz. I'm the assembly member that gets the honor of representing Jackson Heights. Thank you, Corolla. We go way back. I have the honor of representing Jackson Heights, Corona, and Elmhurst, where more than 150 languages are spoken. We are the most diverse district in the country. We have about 40% of our neighbors who are non-citizens. That means many of them have permanent residency, many of them are undocumented. But what's important about that piece is they can't vote. They can't vote for you, Governor, they can't vote for me, they can't vote for Grace. And so what you're doing today is helping change the lives of the people that can't go to the booth and vote for us. And that is something that is commendable, and we thank you for that. As electeds, we've chosen to help improve the lives of our community and fight for our community. So it's disheartening when I had to call Grace and when I had to call FEMA and when I had to call just about everybody and be told, no, there is no help that's coming to your undocumented neighbors. About 3 weeks ago, when Ida ravaged our community and took everything from many of our neighbors, including Doña Nancy, many had already endured the loss of work, the loss of a loved one, and the loss that came with the pandemic. And they were just getting on their feet. And while some were able to get help from the federal government back then, they were also told no. That left our undocumented neighbors, the ones that work, send their kids to our schools, they pay our taxes, and they even own businesses all over Elmhurst, Woodside, East Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, alone to fend for themselves. Our nation's unfortunate and frankly disgusting history of turning to undocumented people to pay their taxes, as Grace was saying, and when it comes time to treat us like humans, and I say us because I grew up undocumented, to treat us like humans, they can't do it. They can't find the way to amend regulations, to amend the law, to give us immigration reform. But that's a conversation for another day. Unlike you and I, during the worst time in the pandemic, they were not able to get help. And the day after Ida devastated my community, my team and I began to work to try to find help for them and for every neighbor. So we actually teamed up with the governor's office, and we had DFS actually come to our office to help us screen people along with our interns. And I gotta give one of those young people who's my intern, Enrique, who's a dreamer, who's actually the first person to screen Doña Nancy, who realized this was a problem. That while we were being told by FEMA, if you have someone in the household who has a social security number, that left thousands of our neighbors out, because often you can have mom, dad, and everybody in the house be completely undocumented. And that's what we faced. We screened more than 60 people, and more than half of those 60 people were undocumented. So half of my neighbors couldn't get the help. They lost everything. They lost everything that they worked so hard for in this country. Doña Nancy, who you'll hear from in a minute, spent 20 years working as a house cleaner and paying her taxes. Because we are told if you want to be a good American, you pay your taxes, even if you don't have documents. But when Doña Nancy's house was taken by Ida, she lived in a basement. There was nowhere she could turn to. And so I did what every elected official, every good elected official does. We started making noise, we wrote letters, we started screaming to whoever would listen to us. We made calls, and one of those calls was answered by you, Governor. And we thank you for that. Your team, and as elected officials, we rely on those teams. You have an amazing group of humans working for the state of New York. They knew and you knew that without your action, my neighbors, Doña Nancy, would have nothing left in this country after working so hard for 20 years. I am eternally grateful to you and your team, and I hope you understand that if it wasn't for you being at the helm of this state, this would have never happened, and definitely not this quick. This is how collaborative governing should look like. So I also want to give a shout out to my colleague, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, who I know was working diligently with the mayor's office, and I know the commissioner's here somewhere. there you are. Shout out to our commissioner, because I know that you were working on making sure that our neighbors would not be left behind. And I hope to see much, much more collaboration in the future, because that's what we should be doing. I want to ask our neighbors who lost everything to reach out to our office, to reach out to the hotline. And I'm going to say it in Spanish for you, Governor. Le doy las gracias a la gobernadora porque puso a nuestra gente al frente. En el momento en que el gobierno federal, como siempre pasa, le dijo a nuestra comunidad indocumentada, sé que pagaron los impuestos, sé que han trabajado acá, sé que son familias que llevan a sus niños a las escuelas, hasta tienen negocios, pero no les podemos ayudar. Eso fue lo que le dijo el gobierno federal a nuestra gente. En el momento en que perdieron todo, el gobierno federal les dio la espalda. Pero gracias a este programa le vamos a poder dar dignidad y recuperación a nuestros vecinos. Un programa que va a tener el máximo de $72,000 para poder recuperar sus cositas, su nevera, sus muebles. Si tuvo que pagar renta en un hotel o, como decimos en Latinoamérica, estar de arrimado de una prima o un hermano, va a poder tener el dinero necesario. Y lo vamos a hacer a mano de organizaciones como Se Hace Camino, porque son organizaciones en las que confiamos y sabemos que van a ayudar a nuestra gente. Y si usted nos está viendo y necesita esa ayuda, le pedimos que llame al número 1-800-566-7636. Vamos a tener las mismas cualificaciones que FEMA para que usted pueda poder rehacer su vida, porque se lo merecen, porque son neoyorquinos sin importar que no tengan un número de seguro social. And so with that, there goes Grace's pen. And with that, I want to introduce Doña Nancy. Doña Nancy was the first constituent who alerted us that the information we were given wasn't necessarily all correct, that you would need a social security number for someone in the household. She has worked as a house cleaner for 20 years. It's a resilient woman, and I hope you will, venga mami, I hope you better understand how this is going to change lives after you hear her. Ponga si quiere aquí el teléfono, mi amor. Sí, hágale, y yo le traduzco.
I'm sorry que estoy muy nerviosa.
Un aplauso para Doña Nancy. Can she get a round of applause? Yes.
Vengo a contarles mi historia. De verdad que fue muy difícil. Yo tenía muchos años viviendo en el basement.
I'm here to tell you my story. It was very tough. I had been living in a basement for many years.
Habían avisado una tormenta, pero yo no me imaginé que iba a ser de esa magnitud.
They had advised that there would be thunder and that there would be lots of rain, but I could not imagine that it was going to be of this magnitude.
Estaba sentada en el comedor y de pronto en el baño sonó ¡pac! Duro.
I was sitting in the dining room and all of a sudden there was a big loud bang coming from the bathroom.
Me paré inmediatamente y ya venía el agua como un río.
I got up immediately and the water was already coming in like a river.
No daba tiempo de nada. Yo trataba de encaramar todo lo que podía en la cama, en los muebles, y venía todo el agua.
There was no time to do anything.
Salió fue de mi cuarto todo el tiempo por los closets.
There was no time to do anything. I tried to pick up my things and move them to higher ground, but it was impossible. It was also even coming through the closets.
Las orillas de las camas, y venía hacia la cocina, o sea, la salita, la cocina, porque es un basement.
And it was coming into our living space and to the kitchen because it's a basement.
Y barría con todo.
And it was
Barría.
wiping everything away.
El agua subía y subía, y yo veía nadar mi ropa, veía nadar los zapatos, las chanclas, todo, o sea, era muy difícil. Yo decía, no puede ser, yo lloraba.
The water was rising, and I would see it taking my clothes, my shoes, and I was saying, this can't be happening, and I was crying.
Yo decía, no puede ser, y cogí el teléfono y no sabía si estaba grabando, estaba llamando a mi hija que está en Florida, la otra tampoco estaba acá, y llamen a mis vecinos. Dios, yo lo único que decía era, Dios, ayúdame.
The only thing I was saying is, God help me, God help me. I tried to call one of my daughters, but she was in Florida, and the other one wasn't answering, and I was saying, call my neighbors.
Ok, bajaron los dos, un muchacho mexicano que me ayudó y la señora de arriba también. Y ellos ya me auxiliaron, me ayudaron a subir lo que más pudimos y ya luego me dijeron el agua va a seguir subiendo, tiene que salir, no la tenemos que sacar porque si no usted se va a electrocutar porque ya llegaba el agua a los
My two neighbors from upstairs
conexiones.
came to help me get everything out, and they told me I had to get out, otherwise I could be electrocuted because the water was getting into the light fixtures.
Ya me quedé en el segundo piso y hasta que el agua bajó un poquito y yo ya volví a bajar porque yo no podía creer que mi apartamento estuviera así, o sea, no. Y cuando bajé, pues el agua todavía ya había bajado un poquito.
So I stayed upstairs for some time until the water calmed down a little bit, and then when I went downstairs, it was still pretty filled.
Todo se perdió, se perdieron los muebles,
I
mi
lost
cama,
everything. I lost my bed, my furniture,
todo lo de la sala, todo lo de la cocina, lo de los gabinetes, abajo todo se perdió.
everything in the cabinets, everything in the kitchen.
El apartamento quedó invivible
The apartment is unlivable,
y yo me tuve que ir.
and I had to leave. Y cuente qué le pasó cuando fue a la oficina.
Entonces ya de tanto escuchar, la gente me preguntaba qué va a hacer. Y me llamaron a una muchacha amiga y me dijo, vaya a la oficina de la asambleísta Catalina Cruz, que allá están ayudando, o sea, allá las pueden informar si le pueden ayudar. Y yo llegué a su oficina. Yo no la conocía, un ángel.
So a friend of mine told me to go to my office, to Assemblywoman's office, that they are helping people who were affected by Ida.
Y ahora estoy en asesoramiento con ella. Muchas gracias a la gobernadora por estar tratando de hacer algo por nosotros.
Thank you, Governor, for doing something for us.
Yo todos estos años he hecho mis taxes.
All these years I've done my taxes.
He sido housekeeping.
I'm a housekeeper.
Gracias a mis patronas que me aman.
My
Ellas
bosses
me
who
han
I work
ayudado,
for.
no me han dejado sola, o sea, me han ayudado. Me dice que no me preocupe, que ellas de alguna manera, pues, económicamente no me ha faltado la comida y he estado bien dentro de lo que cabe.
My bosses who I work for have been looking out for me. They've made sure that I have food to eat, that I'm okay.
Dios es grande.
God is good.
Tenga.
Gracias, doña Nancy. ¿Siguió? No fue tanto el susto. And with that, ya vamos a presentar a alguien más y nos sentamos. With that, I'd love to introduce my brother, our board president, who I'm extremely proud to get to work with, Donovan Richards.
Thank you so much, and what a powerful story, and it speaks to why we're here today. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. And I want to thank the governor today, who actually, has become an honorary Queensite at this point because she is here so much. So I want to thank her for her commitment to this borough, for her leadership. I think back to the morning, in the wee hours of the morning, when we were hit by Ida, getting a call, I think it might have been like 6:40 in the morning, from the governor, asking and saying whatever we need, she will ensure that she delivers on. And I want to thank Governor Hochul for delivering for everybody through this recovery today. Of course, want to thank Mayor Bill de Blasio as well. And of course, I have to highlight culture in Queens. We have the best cultural institutions in the city of New York, and Queens Museum is a part of that. And I want to thank Sally. And I think we had a great announcement this week, a $26 million announcement to expand this beautiful museum that has served not only as just simply a museum, but a food hub during the time of this crisis, this pandemic. So I want to thank you for opening your doors. And to our colleagues, my colleagues in government, we have some fierce women in Queens. And I want to thank all of you for your leadership. When women lead, boy, I tell you, Governor, the women of this borough, I can attest to each and every one of them throwing in their Timberlands, taking their air hoops off to make sure that folks could get back home and that we can have a recovery. So thank you, ladies, for your leadership as well. Listen, it's been a tough near 2 years now, nearly 2 years coming out of this pandemic, thinking about how Queens was the epicenter of the COVID crises. And I think back to these communities that were not only just hit during Ida, but during the crises. Who were the communities that were driving this city? I think back to my father, who had to go to work, who just became a United States citizen just 2 years ago. Thanks, Dad, for voting for me, by the way. But it was folks like my father who had to drive the trains, who had to do deliveries, who are street vendors. They were the folks who the city depended on to run this city during the crisis. And we should never turn our backs on those who are living in the shadows. And Governor, today this announcement says that we see you, that we recognize you, that your contributions to this city will never be forgotten. So thank you, Governor, for this $27 million announcement today, and the mayor, of course, because these are folks who are just coming out of this pandemic trying to get their lives back in order. And then to be gut punched, sucker punched during this storm really impacted communities. But we often know that the communities that are hit hardest, whether it's pandemic, whether it's climate change, are the same communities, the communities of color. And yes, climate change impacts each and every one of us, but it does impact certain communities even worse. You think about the Heat Island effect. You think about blackouts. I go back thinking about Hurricane Sandy, how I represented the Rockaways during that period. And one thing I want to say that differentiates what we went through during Sandy and this crisis is that we actually have leadership that has really stepped up in a big way. During Sandy, it took nearly 2 months before the government arrived to my community. We had boots on the ground within the first week, and that's based on the leadership of our governor. I want to thank you so much. And one of the things that's great about today is we're telling communities that are historically left behind, yes, they are taxpayers, yes, they drive the city, that this government is going to be responsive to you. I also want to add that we are in the most diverse county in the country. Over 200 countries represented right here in Queens County, over 350 languages and dialects spoken right here in this county. It is important and critical that we have cultural competency as we go through this recovery. And that means ensuring that our community-based organizations who speak the languages of our communities, who understand our communities, who have relationships with our communities are also a big part of the recovery. So I want to thank the McWan Center for Community Action and Make the Road for stepping up and making sure that our unseen communities could actually be seen as well. So thank you, and we look forward to working with you. I also just want to add before I conclude that we're very appreciative of FEMA and all of the government entities that are helping us to recover. But I also just want to stress the importance of us continuing to get out into the streets to make sure that FEMA's outreach specialists also speak the language of these communities. But otherwise, they're not going to be able to fill out the applications. And yes, our CBOs play a big part of that, but we also need to stress the importance to FEMA to make sure that culturally competent outreach is happening as well to break down those barriers as well. So with that being said, this country's true greatness lies in its diversity, as we all know. Queens is the center of that, a big part of that. And I want to thank you, Governor, once again, and Mayor Bill de Blasio for really delivering on that promise. With that being said, it gives me great honor to now bring somebody up who's done a lot of great work, I think, back to her work on the Excluded Workers Fund. And we just had a immigrant immigrant fair just this past Saturday. And your work, madam, I mean, we had hundreds of people coming in to fill out the application for excluded workers. And I think it's somewhere around, what is it? The fund is somewhere around 2.1, how much? 2.1 billion. And we need to make sure we deliver on that full 2.1, but the need is so immense that we're going to need more money, Governor. So anytime you come to Queens, you know, we got to stress, you got to bring your checkbook too, all right? So Queens, get the money. But thank you you so much to our state senator who has been seen in 13 and been on the ground. It is my honor to introduce Senator Jessica Ramos.
Queens get the money indeed. It's so good to be up here with you, Borough President. We actually came up in the Queens County Young Democrats together. We've been in the trenches for a very long time. And now that we're serving and stepping up to be able to provide our neighbors with much needed funds, I couldn't be prouder to have so many of our colleagues here. Governor, you've made a world of a difference in a month. You know, when the alleyway in East Elmhurst got flooded, I got the call that very night. I was there first thing in the morning the following day. And then on day 2, the governor came to visit and see the alleyway herself. And she had promised to bring a mobile unit so that our neighbors would have the proper assistance in order to navigate the very complicated world that can be FEMA and that can be their home insurance policies. And on day 3, the governor came back to East Elmhurst with the mobile unit in order to deliver exactly as she said. She brought a halal cart with her, and it really provided comfort for many of our neighbors to know that we finally have a governor who has their back. I want to thank you, Governor, because then, of course, just a few days later, you brought the President of the United States to our little alleyway. 11369, at the peak of the pandemic, was the zip code. I apologize. 11369 at the peak of the pandemic was the zip code with the most amount of deaths in New York State. It is a neighborhood that does not have a hospital, does not have a clinic, doesn't really have any doctors within walking distance, much less the sewage infrastructure that is needed in order to circumvent heavy rainfalls. You know, the alleyway got flooded every time it rained. It was just a matter of whether it was going to be 1 inch or 9 feet of water, as we learned, where we quite possibly could have lost many more of our neighbors. And thankfully, that wasn't the case, and thankfully, hopefully this will never be the case, because through this IDA relief fund, our neighbors, our undocumented neighbors, will finally be able to access what they will need in order to make improvements to their homes and hopefully provide some resiliency. And together with the mayor, I want to thank the mayor's office. We're actually going to be making much of those infrastructure changes that are desperately needed in East Elmhurst over the next few weeks, and there will be an announcement about that. But I do want to thank a few others, because the way we did have to get creative about finding resources for those who don't qualify, you know, it wasn't only about providing food trucks when they couldn't cook and the gas wasn't working and there was no hot water and such. But actually, I want to shout out La Una, Local 78, Local 79, IBEW, Local 3. Thankfully, as the labor chair and a former employee of the labor movement, we were able to get these folks to come volunteer their time and help gut a lot of the basements, which they would not otherwise be able to afford to do so. This would be very, very delayed construction work had it not been for them. And as such, it's really been a labor of love. It's been incredible to see how our community comes together one time and time again to address these issues for each other, but more so to have the governor and to have the state actually now be a part of that camaraderie and of that sense of neighborhood that we're so proud of here in East Elmhurst and in Queens. So thank you, Governor. Te quiero agradecer por esta iniciativa, proveer a nuestros vecinos con los fondos que necesitan para hacer las mejoras a sus casas, que son tan necesarias en este momento. Es muy desafortunado que las mismas personas, los mismos barrios que sufrieron sufrieron tanto durante la pandemia a raíz del coronavirus también se vean tan afectados por el cambio climático. Y es que nosotros como comunidades de color siempre estamos al frente de estas emergencias. Y la verdad, hemos visto en prácticamente su primer mes como gobernadora a la gobernadora Hochul estar acá en Queens, creo que ya 4 veces. Para demostrarnos lo que es un liderazgo que se preocupa por la gente, que siente compasión, que se identifica con el dolor ajeno y que está proveyendo 27 millones de dólares reales para ayudar a nuestra gente. Así que le quiero agradecer a ella. I also want to thank Jordan Beberman, who's around here somewhere. She was in the trenches with me every day for at least 9 days. She does deserve a round of applause. You know, Jordan and I are good Astoria girls, and it's been a pleasure to work with you, and I do want to shout you out. More often than not, the staff doesn't get the limelight, but you did the right thing, and we're better for your service, and we're better for the governor's leadership. Thank you all for being here. Looking forward to making sure that we get as much of that money in our neighbors' pockets as possible. Thank you. I usually don't have Mistress of Ceremonies duties, so I apologize, but I do have the honor of introducing a man who really needs no introduction. Every New Yorker knows that at the helm of the Assembly, we have a strong man, a strong New Yorker, a strong Bronxite, who, that's okay, who has given great priority to our undocumented New Yorkers, who helped us get the Excluded Workers Fund passed. And I'm so thankful to you, Speaker Hasty, for being here with us today to stand up for our immigrant New Yorkers once again. Thank you so much. Please join us.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be in Queens. And I know let's mention the Queens, but I always like to tell y'all if it wasn't for the Bronx, don't ever forget that. So I do want to acknowledge, I do want to acknowledge 3 wonderful members of the Assembly that I see. I see Nilly, I see Jessica, and of course I see Catalina, and to our wonderful governor. You know, I was in Buffalo last week, and a member of the press said to me, well, do you feel during this pandemic and the aftermath that the state of New York is spending too much money? And I gave him a bewildered look, and I said, well, should we say to all of the families of people who have been unemployed and excluded workers and businesses that were spending too much money? I said it's government's job to step in and help people when they need help. And so I'm happy that I want to give a lot of credit to our governor and to the mayor for stepping up. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what government is supposed to do. And no community should ever be forgotten. So I think this was a heartfelt, and as much as it was heartfelt, it's the right thing to do. If you're a resident of the state and the city needs to help you. So I'm so happy to be here. I think it's very important. But unfortunately, this won't be the last time we're going to have one of these type of events with the environmental circumstances that we have with climate change. This unfortunately may become part of the norm. But if we can try to do things to mitigate in terms of having better infrastructure, have better preparation, hopefully these things won't be too bad. But to say I hope I'm never going to be here again, I don't even want to mislead people. I know I'm going to be here again dealing with the next crisis. But I do want to give credit to all of those. Again, the people on the ground. This has been a tough year and a half. It's all hands on deck. So it means all of the other problems, we're still dealing with the COVID situation. But like I said, this is what we're here for. So I'm happy to be here, and always a challenge. And I do want to, I'm not supposed to break the confidence of a leaders meeting. But Governor, if you forgive me, one of the first meetings I had with Governor Hochul, I was raising the issue. I said, we in the budget we put together a lot of good programs with good money, and I said, but we need to make sure that it's not one program at a time. And so Governor Hochul just looked at our team and said, make it so. I thought I was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation. But that's the first thing she said she wanted to make sure that the money gets out and gets to the people. So to give that kind of instruction, because listen, we are all leaders and you have a lot of people but she's the captain of the ship and she gave the right order. So Governor Hochul, I want to thank you for that. And thank you everyone, but I also have I was given the instruction to introduce Raquel Batista, a longtime friend from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. Thank you. Good to see you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I am honored to join Governor Hochul in making this historic announcement. Hurricane Ida's devastation has severely impacted our immigrant community. And in the aftermath of the storm, my team was out on the field connecting with families to available resources. And I just want to take a moment to recognize all of the mayor offices that were out on the field, helping people at the centers, at their homes, emergency management, the Department of Sanitation, our public engagement unit. Everyone really stepped up to help all of our New Yorkers, regardless of immigration status. Yet we were disheartened when thousands of undocumented families who lost their home and livelihood could not qualify for assistance through FEMA. Every single family, regardless of immigration status, should be able to access the necessary resources to build back from this storm. And announcing this $27 million fund comes at a critical time. So I'd like to thank the state for their advocacy on behalf of undocumented New Yorkers, a group often forgotten about. This effort is truly a stellar example of the amazing things that can happen when the state and the city work together. And to our immigrant community, the deadline to apply is November 26th. Call the ONA hotline at 1-800-566-7636 to connect with the nonprofits that will help with the application. Assistance will be available in over 200 languages. And we would like to encourage folks to please be aware of fraud. There is no application fee for this program, and please use the information that we will be providing to get to the right organizations that will be helping you apply for this application. And I'll just say a few words in Spanish, en español ahora. Primero, gracias a la gobernadora por esta iniciativa tan importante en nuestra comunidad. Hacerle llegar 27 millones de dólares es crucial en este momento. Y le queremos dejar saber a nuestra comunidad inmigrante que tienen hasta el 26 de noviembre de poder aplicar para este fondo. Este fondo es para las personas que son los damnificados de la tormenta de Ida y que por favor cuando pueden llamar al número 1-800-566-7636 para conseguir más información sobre esta aplicación. Y también les quiero decir que por favor llamen a este número. No necesitan pagar para hacer esta aplicación. Esta aplicación es gratis y está disponible para todos los damnificados. Otra vez, gracias. Thank you.
Gracias, gracias, gracias. This is such a special day. To our speaker, I didn't have a chance to acknowledge you. I acknowledge you in your absence, but also want to recognize that this is his birthday week. And as the captain of the Enterprise, I want to say live long and prosper. Yes, I saw all the original episodes. It was on my TV every night around 4:30 when I was trying to get out of help my mom cook dinner. No, I got to watch Star Trek. So it was a great excuse. So to all of our immigration groups, our coalitions, and Make the Road has been really, and all of you have stepped up in just a powerful way. I just want to say before we take a couple questions, we have more work to do. But I believe we've changed people's hearts and minds about what a community looks like and feels like here in the state of New York. And we are inclusive. Everyone is part of my family, your family, the family of New Yorkers. So we are going to right many of the wrongs of the past, and continue to work with our federal government partners to do something. I worked on the original immigration bill in 1986 with Senator Moynihan to make sure that we gave what was called amnesty at the time, would say you're living here, you're part of the family, now you have the official documentation. And I believe that is going to be the calling of our lifetime to make sure that we do the same again for the 10 million people who are part of our community. So thank you. Again, my thanks to the City of New York. Again, we have a lot of work to do together. And with that, I'll take a couple questions. I know we want to. I've got another issue that's kind of percolating, if anybody's paying attention to the news, so I only have a couple of minutes here. But Joseph, I want to ask you first from the city. I know you've been covering us quite a bit on this. Yeah.
Severe weather has become part of the norm now with record rainfall happening frequently. What are your thoughts on trying to create a fund like this to be permanent for the next time we have another ICO?
That is very much a possibility, something I'd be happy to talk to our leadership going forward, but I also just want to acknowledge that we didn't have a fund in this case, and 3 weeks after the event, the money's going out. So we also have the ability to be very flexible and nimble going forward if something were to happen next. I really have been hardwired now to think that this could happen every 10 days. And I'm operating with that sense of urgency that the speakers spoke about, that this is the new normal for us. But under my watch, never again will people in this community, the excluded New Yorkers, ever feel excluded again. Let me call on Univision. Lunavision? Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Are the survivors going to be able to fill out the application by themselves, or they gotta go through the organization?
No, these organizations, well, they have both. These organizations are there to help get information out to them should they need assistance, but they absolutely should call that number, and I'll repeat it, and you'll translate for me, 1-800-566-7636, and we are staffing up an operations center to be able to handle the volume of calls coming in. So if people want to do it on their own, they absolutely can. They don't have to wait for that. Telemundo? Anybody here from Telemundo? All right, I'll take.
One more.
Okay. Yes.
Does the state have any estimates about how many people might be eligible? Can you talk about outreach of the program? And then is there anything that you would say to mixed status families who may be too afraid to apply for FEMA if they don't qualify for this program?
My message is don't be afraid. This is the state of New York. We will protect you. We have your back. Do not worry. And again, I know that could be a barrier for some people, but this is a program designed for them. There are very caring people administering it, and they'll be fine. What was the first part of your question? How many people? Yeah. We know that, and that's a really good question. I asked the same. I mean, what is our universe of people that we're dealing with? We have 1,200 homes that were destroyed during this, and if the estimates are about half were FEMA eligible, that means 600 are not. But also within that, there were people that if they had one member of the family who had citizenship, they did qualify for the full FEMA money. So it's hard to know. It's less than 1,200. It's more than one. So somewhere in that range. And we'll have, and also, we've asked these organizations that have stepped up to be our partners in this. They'll also be monitoring afterward. I mean, they're going to make sure that this is done properly, that people do establish that they did live in a place at the time and that they did suffer the ravages of what I personally saw. I literally could probably do this myself. I saw so many home after home after home and said, they need new water heaters, they need a new refrigerator, they need a new stove, they need a new bed, they need new clothes, they need new little tiny sneakers, like we saw that 6-year-old sitting there, dirty water, scrubbing her little shoes so she had something to wear, and it just broke my heart. So don't have a number. We'll make sure we get. Thank you, everybody. Please get vaccinated. We're in a time where we're making tremendous progress, but there are still communities that have not been successful in that. And again, this money goes out to areas including the Bronx, Westchester, Rockland, Queens, and every area that's been part of the federal disaster declaration. So as much as we're having fun here in Queens, it also goes to the Bronx and elsewhere. Well, thank you, everybody. Got to run.